because they can be very, not just very interesting, but also quite insightful, right? Because we get to hear from the perspective of our different speakers, and we try to make the lineup diverse so that the thoughts being shared really is not coming from, for a lack of better word, one particular industry or one sector of the ecosystem. Anyways, welcome, guys. Uh, so we are going to be discussing who to hire, when to hire your first team, who to hire, and when to hire your first um, team. On the surface, it might look like a not so consequential topic, right? Because it's not talking about maybe revenue or scaling, because those seem to be the things that make headlines, or fundraising. But at the end of the day, what drives the success of an enterprise, a venture, a business, a startup, really is the founding members of that venture or business, as the case may be. The core founding members are usually the determinant of success. And when it comes to early stage startups, right, both VCs say this and angels, at that early stage, you're not really keen or focused on the idea per se, right? You're more focused on the founder. You are investing in the founder. And I made a post on LinkedIn last week that early stage investing will always be about the founders, right? Because you are taking a bet on them and not their idea. Because let's face it, nobody is certain that any idea really will succeed, because so many factors are in play that could potentially tank that idea. So really, what you are betting on, or who you are betting on, are the founders and the core founding team at that early stage of the life cycle of the development of that enterprise or venture. Which is why we are discussing who to hire and when to hire your first team. And I'm so happy with our lineup today. We have David Larimeso on the call. Let me just quickly read out his bio, and then we get on to the next speaker. One second, please. I had it queued up here, and suddenly I can no longer find it. Apologies, 1 second. Yes, David Larimeso, often known as DLM, is a Nigerian entrepreneur, venture builder, venture studio operator, and startup advisor based in Lagos. He is the founder and chief venture builder, or should I say, he is the founding partner and chief venture builder of First Founders, a venture studio and ecosystem collective focused on helping African tech startups develop ideas into investable businesses. DLM has a background in mass communication and has studied at institutions like Lagos State University of Science and Technology, Harvard Business School Online, and Oxford University. He has been recognized for his contributions, including named one of Nigeria's top CEOs in 2020 by Top 10 magazine, senator of the World Business Angels Investment Forum, and serving as a James Corey academic visitor at the University of Oxford's African Studies Center in 2022. He has a very, very robust CV here, and I'm unfortunately, for a lack of time, I will not be able to read all of them, but we get the gist of who DLM is and his contributions to the ecosystem. So I will move forward to our next amazing speaker, Omolara Olarinri. She is the CEO and co-founder of Pocket Food, a Nigerian food management startup revolutionizing the country's food delivery industry by automating healthy eating for busy professionals. Under her leadership, Pocket Food has experienced steady growth since its inception in August 2022, delivering over 700,000 meals, raising funding, expanding into 3 cities in Nigeria, and winning multiple awards and recognition, both locally and internationally. Omalara's passion for creating impactful solutions stems from her belief in the transformative power of technology to solve everyday problems. As the CEO of Pocket Food, she has successfully combined her technical acumen with her commitment to wellness, ensuring that the company not only meets but exceeds the expectations of its growing customer base. Welcome, Omolara. We are happy to have you on the call today. And we also have the very capable 𝗪𝗛𝗓 on the call as well, our third speaker. 𝗪𝗛𝗓 is co-founder and COO of 𝗪𝗂𝗿, a company that is enabling Africa's digital transformation by building tech-focused talent and businesses. 𝗪𝗛𝗓 coordinates 𝗪𝗂𝗿's delivery of innovative solutions related to education, talent management, digital advisory and implementation services, and venture building. 𝗪𝗛𝗓 has 2 decades of experience delivering impact-focused work in locations worldwide. She started her career in management consulting with IBM Global Business Services. Before joining 𝗪𝗂𝗿, 𝗪𝗛𝗓 was CEO of 𝗪𝗡𝗙𝗀, Enhancing Financial Innovation and Access, an organization that drives inclusive finance in Nigeria through research, advocacy, capacity building, and innovation. In this role, 𝗪𝗛𝗓 supervised leading research and engagement on financial sector innovation in Nigeria and oversaw the delivery of 𝗪𝗡𝗙𝗀's Innovation Fund. Let me catch my breath a bit. So we have a very interesting lineup of speakers, and I'm excited for the conversation. So I'm going to start from DLM. DLM, kindly unmute your mic and say hello before we proceed. And then Omolara can go next and Ashley can follow after.
Great evening, everyone. Samuel, thank you for the introduction. I'm happy to be on this X space today, and I'm looking forward to an interesting conversation. Thank you very much.
Amazing, amazing. Omolara.
Hi, thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone, for being on the call. I'm glad to be here, and I'm looking forward to having interesting conversations. Thank you.
Fantastic. We're happy to have you, Omolara, as well. Ashley.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Happy to be here. Thanks very much to the organizers. Thanks.
We're happy to have you here, Ashley. I am Samuel 𝗪𝗂𝗿, co-founder and Chief Marketing Officer here at First Founders. I will be anchoring today's Twitter space. And without further ado, I'm going to dive right into the questions we have here. I will be starting with DLM. From your experience building multiple startups under a venture studio model, what are the first non-founder hires you've seen consistently make or break early companies? I can take that again. From your experience building multiple startups under a venture studio model, what are the first non-founder hires you've seen consistently make or break early companies? So what are hires that are not core founders that you've seen affect the success of startups? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Samuel. So, in terms of non-founder hires, the first thing we need to consider, because I like to backtrack a little bit, the moment you build a product, the very first thing you need to start thinking about is sales, revenue. And for me, personally, I've always believed that revenue is a moving engine for a business. So if peradventure I am a technical founder, I have built the product, if I'm talking about the non-technical founder, or technical team, non-technical team in this case, I should first of all be thinking about who's going to move the needle of the business. And that should mainly be about those who will drive growth, for the business. And that's simply because I believe strongly that in the early stages of a business, there are two things to think about. You need to think about, you know, the building phase and the scaling phase. At the building phase, you need to hire generalists. I hire generalists because you also want to be able to maintain capital efficiency and operational efficiency, most especially capital efficiency. And in maintaining capital efficiency, you need to bring in people that can take on multiple roles, but it has to be hinged on the very core of the business, which, in my own opinion, is the moving needle of the business, which is revenue. Because after you build a product, what next? That should be the next question you should be asking. And for me, in the real sense of things, it should be revenue. Because after revenue, you are also thinking about what next, which is to go either raise funds or find ways to bring in capital to the business. But then investors will not invest in your business without metrics. So which means I need to answer the question of metrics, your unit economics, and which is why, from a non-technical perspective, in hiring a growth person that can also play, multiple roles in between moving the needle of the business is very fundamental to the growth, of the business. So I'll leave it at this point.
Amazing. Thanks so much for that, DLM. I was very excited when you mentioned hiring generalists at this early stage. I have will I say a contrary opinion for well, I would say uh trends that I've noticed is that even the need for specialists at the scaling stage might be phased out in the future. And that is because we've seen, and this is, I got this insight after reading a bunch of developments on AI. And the founder of Replit was talking about how in the near future, companies would much more rather hire generalists and then augment with AI for those specialist roles. And I kind of agree with that. But for the early stage, of course, yes, generalist. But I feel like that's a discussion for another time. And I'm going to backtrack to that much later in the conversation. But Ashley, I have a question for you. Um, you've built a platform that creates tech talent at scale. From your experience, what skills are founders underestimating when hiring their earliest teams in Africa?
Thank you. It's a great question. And I'll sort of build on and won't repeat what DLM has already said. I think well, and you asked about skills, but I'll also speak a bit maybe to attitude and motivation. So I think the first thing that's really critical is alignment in terms of vision and mission and purpose. So, and I think sometimes in a different company, we will have people pass. Maybe they'll just be there a couple years and move on to other things, and that's fine. But I think it's good to be clear on that. I do think that in an very early stage, there's a lot that's involved in building, and it's important for people to really be aligned on those key things, as well as the values and ways of working. So that's kind of an attitude. But in terms of skill sets, I would say there are a few. Number one is really innovation itself requires a set of skills. And a lot of early stage businesses will make the mistake of being very product driven, maybe very technology or solution driven, instead of being very customer driven or problem driven. So in the early stage of the business, this is when usually the companies are still trying to find product market fit. And so they need to fall in love with their problem, fall in love with that vision, be very committed to it, but they cannot fall in love with a particular product or solution. They also, to achieve that product market fit, really need to start with a deep understanding of that problem, the customers, the people experiencing that challenge. In 𝗪𝗏, so this is why, for example, in 𝗪𝗏, even the people who come to us to be trained as software engineers, the first thing we actually teach them is design thinking. Because there's no point, you can be a great engineer, but if you can't, there's no point building beautiful software if you're solving the wrong problem, if nobody wants to use it or to pay for it. So I think having those foundational problem solving, sort of design thinking, product discovery skills are really important on the team. And that's across board. So, DLM spoke about generalists. At early stage, everybody is going to have to be involved in really achieving that product market fit. So obviously, the people who are sort of in a product owner type role or product manager or designers, it's a bit more obvious. But even early stage, who's building something, your finance people, they all need to be sort of thinking in that same mindset and have some skills around innovation. Yeah, I would say that maybe there's also, the general professional set of skills that we need. I guess this is, again, maybe a bit more of attitude, but proactiveness is really critical. Strong critical thinking skills. The team at early stage is evolving very quickly. People are filling gaps all the time. So they need to be able to, first of all, they need to have that proactiveness to even see there's a problem, let me jump in and solve it. They need the reasoning skills to sort of quickly understand what's going on. They also need really learning orientation and skills. So everybody in an early stage businesses are basically learning entities. So they'll need those learning skills both in terms of the collective team's approach to their work, but also on an individual level. We have to figure out how to meet this regulatory requirement. Let me quickly go and learn what that is, what relationships do we need to build, how do we scale through it, etc. So I think those are some of the key things. I'll pause there.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Ashley. I love that you touched on alignment, which is very key in the earlier stages because, and this is coming from the angle of very often, especially for first-time founders, and usually which is common here in the part of the world we're in, resources are very limited at the earlier stages. And motivation usually isn't driven by compensation or financial compensation right off the bat. So it's usually about buying into the vision, right, and understanding the gravity of the problem the team or the solution should solve, and aligning with that. I'm so happy that you touched on that. I totally excluded that from my from my question originally. I'm happy that you brought the conversation back there. So before I move on to our next speaker, I just want to welcome every one of us again to this conversation. Thank you for taking out the time. Please, in the course of speaking, if you have questions, kindly just note them. Very soon we are going to open the floor up to questions, and we can take questions, suggestions, contributions as the case may be. Thanks again, Ashley, for that. Omolara, I have a question for you. In industries like food management, oh, and again, to our speakers, please, if any other speaker makes a point that you feel you need to maybe build on, please feel free to unmute and speak on that, so that it's not just about me throwing out questions. Immediately a speaker speaks, so that it's more of a conversation than an interview. I don't know if that makes sense. So yes, Omolara, in industries like food management, what's the right balance between hiring permanent staff and using contractors or flexible workers? I understand that can be a dicey situation, or a dicey dynamic really for you. So can you shed more light on that, and have you been able to sort of like navigate that unique situation?
Thank you very much for that. That's a thoughtful question, right? And when I'm asked this and then I think about it, it's right for anyone that is going into the service industry. There's a lot of use of contract workers, which is quite all right. But I would say that prioritize the permanent guys first. Prioritize having someone that's there around the clock, someone that's there through the seasons, that understands your business, just as much as you do, compared to contract staff, right? So one of the things you need to do is to find a balance between those, right? And one of the ways to find a balance is to look at where you are spending most of your time in. As a business owner, you'll find yourself spending a lot of your time in one particular task. It could be the business development, it could be sales, it could be customer management, it could be operations, right? So where are the places, right? I usually call them your touch points, right? Look at the touch points in your business, critical control points, to be precise, right? In terms of where they contact you from, in terms of how you deliver these services, in terms of how you make the services smooth. These are all your touch points, are all your critical touch points, right? And this is where most times you spend a lot of your time in. when you find yourself spending a lot of time in these places, these are the places that you need to get a permanent staff in. Someone that you can attest to their skills at them being able to handle this particular task. For example, it could be customer success, right? I won't expect you to contract customer success out to people that comes and go, knowing that your clients, they prioritize, especially in my own line of industry, they prioritize genuine human connection. Being able to know that this particular person that I'm speaking to, I'll still see them to speak to again next week. I'll see them speak to again upper week. I'll see them speak to again next month, right? I won't advise anyone to contract that kind of touch points where you have to constantly connect your source of income to a particular person, to a particular space. So the way the formula I usually use is when I'm trying to find a balance, or when I'm trying to think of hiring, justifying hiring, either in the permanent side or in the contract side, is, or especially in permanent side, is how long or how much time does it take, or how much or how long sorry, I don't know, can you hear me? Because my Wi-Fi seems to have gone down.
Yes, I can hear you
I
clearly.
can hear you. We can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay, then. So I'll say, how much time am I using to do this, right? Plus the skills that is needed, and will it give me money? So it's just like, how long am I doing this? Plus the skills that are needed to do this, will it equate to money for me, right? So is customer success taking a lot of time? Because in my business, I tend to speak to our clients a lot, right? So we're talking about food here, we're talking about a lot of staffs here. So we tend to talk to our clients a lot of times. Sometimes even that some of our clients that's chatting us up 12 a.m. in the midnight, or sorry, I'm supposed to add this to this, something like that usually happens, right? So we find ourselves taking a lot of time talking to our clients, right? And it needs skills as well. It needs human skills. You need to be able to interact with the clients without getting irritated. You need to know how to form relationships. So it takes skills, right? And I know that with this skill and the amount of time it takes me to manage these clients, it will equate to revenue for me, right? So that's the way I have an equation for it. A long time plus a skill, will it equate to money for me? So if the answer is yes, then I hire a permanent staff. Now, if it's going to take less time, if whatever task I need it doesn't take more than maybe 10 hours in a week, or it doesn't take more than like 2 hours in a day, right? And does not need specialized skills, right? It would equate to money, but not as much as the other. Then I talk about contract staff. These are the people that maybe we need someone to be in the restaurant, maybe in the restaurant that we're taking our order, want to be there to offtake meals, to ensure that the meals are are packed the right way, right? I don't necessarily have to have a permanent staff do that, because this is not taking a lot of time. You're just there for like 2 hours, 1 hour in the day, and it doesn't take too much skill, right? So I'd rather contract that out, knowing that I'm able to work with anyone. All I have to do is just give them a bit of training, and then they're able to do it without costing us too much problems, right? But now I'm talking about customer success. Would I give a customer success role to a contract staff? No, because I know that it takes a lot of time, it takes skills, and it also brings us money. So that's the equation I use to balance my decision to either contract or permanent. And I hope that helps someone out there as well.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Omolara, for walking us through your reasoning behind that. It throws light on the need for founders to truly be critical thinkers, and considering every decision really from all angles to ensure that no mistakes are made, especially in the early stages, right? Because obviously we know the statistics that says most startups fail in their first 5 years, which are the formative years of the company. So you can't afford to make terrible decisions, especially for for situations that directly impact the success of the business, which is, as we are discussing, key hires at the early stages. Thanks so much for that, Omolara. DLM, I have another question for you. And this is in the context of the venture studio model, right? When running multiple companies, how do you decide what roles to centralize at the studio level versus embedding directly within each startup team? I'll take that again. When running multiple companies, how do you decide what roles to centralize at the studio level versus integrating into each startup?
All right, thank you very much. So just to build context, so let's assume that you are running a company, a couple of companies, two, three companies at the same time. And you know that they can share common resources. Take, for example, tech resources, operational resources, legal resources, even financial resources. Because at the end of the day, the finance guy is not working every day, especially in your early stages. So a one finance person can work on three startups because in the early stage, there's just little that you are doing, right? And instead of you to hire three people that will work across these three, in these three startups. What about if one person gets to work and you get to save yourself two people's salary, which makes it capital efficient, for the startup. So from a context of a venture studio, really, one of the reasons why we run venture studios really is because we understand that in the beginning of a startup's life cycle, there is not a lot that will be done across the various departments. We look at the most important pillars in in the life of a startup, which is operations, marketing, and finance, right? So for operations, we know that that is very important. We bring experts in to provide the operational support. But then in the case where we see that the operations is beginning to scale, in terms of workload and all of that, we now begin to streamline that common resource point of operations to now having a single line of operations for that particular startup. And that's because operation is scaling at that point in time. You understand? Same thing for marketing and same thing for finance, legal, and all of that, right? It helps to maximize capital on one hand, also helps to maximize operations in the early stages, for that startup. So as a venture studio, what do we do really? We have shared resources around, operations, around, finance, around legal, around even hiring, talking about HR. Why should we hire five HR for five startups when we can have just one HR for those five startups in the beginning until particularly the startup begins to generate, revenue that can make it now afford, not just only afford, but most importantly, require compelling, at a compelling level, that services of an HR person in managing, a wide array of, staff and all of that. So the venture studio, critically, stands for operational efficiency and capital efficiency, at this level. And it just sort of makes things more smoother for, startups. Now, in terms of challenges, would you say are there not challenges and all of that? Yes, of course, there are challenges in between, you know, hiring, people and at the same time having to serve multiple startups at the same time, especially on a need by need basis where maybe two startups need the same thing at the same time, right? And they will have a common resource that they have to pull from, and this is where prioritizing sort of comes in because that particular situation is not going to happen, every day. So the fact that it happens today does not mean that it's going to happen tomorrow as well. So it just sort of, leaves the HR person or the operations person having to prioritize what is going to be needed at this point in time, what's going to be needed at this other point in time, at this particular, day or all of that. So I think that, on a need by need basis, this sort of makes things work faster. So I'd like to stop at this point.
Fantastic, DLM. I have a follow-up question. As you were speaking, another question came to mind. So, how do you think the studio helps the portfolio companies when it's time to exit the studio? What's that process like handing over to the recruitment process, right, for their core teams as they sort of like begin to phase out of the venture studio? what's that process like, and how does the studio ensure a seamless transition and handover process from the core studio team to the new recruits at the exiting portfolio company?
So the interesting thing about, a studio hiring a team to manage a couple of startups is that there are experts, and because these are experts, and putting it together with capital, a startup that is traditional in nature, you know, excuse me, sorry, a startup that is traditional in nature may not be able to afford the cost of a specialist just for one startup. But a venture studio can afford a specialist, you know, in the beginning, you know, considering the fact that that specialist is going to work across a couple of startups. We are decentralizing, the cost of one specialist across five startups, as against one startup hiring a specialist, which is going to be capital intensive, in the early stages of the business. And following this in itself, the hiring process for us enable us to sort of focus on expertise, experience on one hand, which will increase productivity on the other hand, but most importantly, help the specialist to achieve results for each of the startup at 10x. And that's one thing that has differentiated, the venture studio model in itself to working with, a traditional model and all of that. Because I wouldn't even advise a traditional model, a traditional startup to hire a specialist in the beginning. You would rather hire a generalist that can do a lot of things, because you are trying to align on culture, you are aligning on values, you're also aligning on specific skill set that is needed part time. Take for example, if you're a non-technical founder, you need a technical person to come on board to help you to handle the technology side of things for the business. If you're a technical founder, then you now have to think about what is the most, or what is the priority, for the business. Is it going to be revenue to move the needle, or is it going to be operations, or is it just going to be somebody that will help to drive growth on another level for the business? So this is where you have to be very critical, or it's going to be a combination of all of these things. But you have to now find who exactly can fill this gap and play, you know, multiple roles at the same time for the business for lesser fee, and all of that. And realistically, you see a lot of startups hire people. Some of them hire friends. Some of them will hire people, who are entry level, and then they have to now spend a lot of money to either train, these people on one hand, and on the other hand, would also have to now juggle with productivity, because now you have to do one thing three times for you to be able to get it. And this is in itself is costing time. And time in itself is money, which is capital, which in itself, what should take you 1 month to achieve might take you 3 months to achieve. Put the cost of 3 months together to achieving that specific thing, that you want to do, which of course you might not even achieve in that 3 months. So what has happened technically is that you wasted money and all of that. So the venture studio in itself helps to de-risk that and manage that by bringing people that can work across board, providing that significant value for the growth, of each of the startups that are within the portfolio. I don't know if that makes some sense to the question.
It does, but you skipped the later part of my question, which is what is the process of weaning the startup, like them leaving, and what's the process of handing over all the capacity, all the responsibilities that were previously handled by the studios team to the new hires
Okay,
of
I get
the
that. So,
existing
so the
portfolio
truth,
company.
the
Yeah.
truth is that every startup that is within a venture studio is there's a simple goal for each of them, for all of them to get to product market fit, generating revenue that enable them to sort of scale to the next phase, right? And it is expected that in a venture studio, the startup is provided all of the support across operations, marketing, legal, finance for at least 36 months. Because it is believed that in 36 months, the startup would have masterminded the process, of operating that business on one hand, would have also gotten to the point of sustainable revenue, for the business, where they can afford to hire specialists even at that point, because we are talking about the startup already at pre-series A, or worst case scenario, you at seed. And at seed, you're already raising about 1.5 to $3 million, you know, in itself. And you are also already doing about, 30,000 to $50,000 in monthly recurring revenue. That in itself positions you as a startup to begin to live your own life. So at that point, yes, you should start recruiting people. Does that mean that even in the early stages, you can recruit people? You can recruit specific people. For example, Omolara mentioned something about customer success, manager for a business. Yes, even in a venture studio, we hire a specific customer success manager for the startup, right? We hire communications people, because direct engagement with, you know, with your customers at that point in time cannot be democratized. You have to be able to, sort of specifically streamline that conversation or that engagement to one person, so that you'll be able to manage productivity, and also you're also able to manage, high level of performance, for the startup. So this in itself are specific touch points that one needs to consider when it comes to startup, moving within the venture studio and into the next phase of having to hire. But then you have to mature into it, and it has to be need focused. It has to be need focused, as you grow, because you cannot say, hey, because you need something today, you might need it tomorrow. And this is why you should also be thinking about what we need today. Should we hire a permanent staff for it, or hire a contract staff for it, or we should share from the pool of, the venture studio
Yeah.
resources? You understand what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So all of these sort
Yeah.
of come together to, to determine, the startup, should hire early enough, or should go through the process of that 36 months before they begin to hire holistically.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, DLM. Ashley, I have a question for you. We've seen a shift in the global workforce from hiring based on credentials, right? Your degrees, years of experience, to more skill-based hiring. So I guess my question would be, how do you think this shift is affecting the African workforce, especially the startups particularly, and what do you think the next few years would be like? Is this a trend that is going to continue, or do you think it's just a bubble?
Yeah, thank you. I think to that point around changing maybe structures in terms of certificates of all sorts, I think that will definitely continue. So, in the past, the people would maybe learn for the first 20 years of their life. They would start to specialize toward the end of that learning journey through university or polytechnic or something, apprenticeship or something. They would then embark on a career and spend oftentimes about 40 years working in that kind of line of work, and then retire for the remaining years of their lives. And I think that that is really gone. So what we're seeing now is that really those careers, those vocations are going to be evolving more and more. So even if we wanted to, we can't really go to university at age, 18 to 22, learn the foundations of accounting, for example, and then just expect to be a practicing accountant for 40.
Actually, I can no longer hear you. I don't know if it's just from my end, but we
Same thing.
have
Same thing here.
lost you. All right, let me bring her back on. She just left the stage. Ashley, I've sent you an invite to come on stage again. I think Ashley is having a bit of network issue. I'm going to move on to Omolara. When she comes back, we can circle back to her response. So, Lara, your business relies heavily on frontline staff for service delivery, which means that the quality of your staff members needs to be excellent. So, how do you maintain consistent quality while scaling headcount?
All right. The simple answer to that is hire right from the very beginning. There's little you can do if you hire someone that is not well suited to that skill and then start trying to train them and train them and train them. You probably not get as much results when you hire right from the very beginning, right? And depends on the particular what's it called, particular job title you are giving to them. Make sure that the hard skills and the soft skills align, right? And if you're hiring for customer success, you shouldn't hire someone that is that isn't a friendly person, someone that doesn't that's not able to speak nicely, you know, that all the soft skills that you need to look out for, right? So that by the time you start expanding and start scaling, these guys already understand your business. These guys already fits and align to what your values and core values are. So even when you bring in more staff, they are the one that would even train the staff below you, right? So always have a culture of rewarding your staff when they do something good, right? Because they will always want to do more. One of the things that we did in our company was for when we bring in someone newly, you know, when you start newly, you start from a point, and in the next 6 months, when you do well, you go up a notch, right? And that notch does not, as a startup, you don't need to, like, it doesn't necessarily translate to having to increase their salary or anything, but it just means that they get that validation that they are progressing in their career. It stays well on their CV, on their LinkedIn. It also means that they're able to train other people that come below them. So they get that that responsibility. And once they get that responsibility, they want to sit tight, they want to do more, right? So have a culture of expansion in your team, right? Don't keep one person in the same position for 2-3 years, know where they're going, there's no motivation, you know. So have that culture, have the culture of hiring right from the very beginning, because I've been burnt by, oh, let me just hire this person, and they would learn along the way, you know, because maybe I'm trying to quickly fill up a space, or the person was recommended by a friend, you know. So I've learned to hire according to merit, not by, oh, this, let me to look at this person's CV. This person looks like a great fit, right? I also introduced some hiring steps in my procedure. As a startup, it's very normal that once you're hiring, you might make mistakes. You know, it's very normal. And sometimes you might not want to go and give a recruiter because you feel like the recruiter will collect too much money from you or stuff like that. I wouldn't argue against having a recruiter, because having a recruiter has its own perks, right? So, but when I started as a startup, I'm still a startup anyways, but when I started newly, I was the one hiring for myself, and I made a lot of mistakes, you know, just hiring and not, you know, quite a lot of mistakes. So along the way, I learned how to hire better and how to hire right, you know, having some tiered ways, like the first interview, second interview with other members of, like, members of the board, another interview with a member of the team, you know, and give them what's it called, give them this what's the English word, case studies to work with, right? And just make sure that you are aligned and they're aligned to what your business is doing, so that when you scale, you don't have to start looking for multiple people that will take a skill. Let the person that you've hired first, let the person be so skilled enough that when they go, when you scale, they also scale as well. So that's my answer to that.
Thanks so much, Lara. That is very, very insightful. Ashley, are you able to speak now? Welcome back. We lost you there for a sec.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Clearly, loud and clear.
Okay, thanks. You had to change networks. Yeah, thank you. So what I was saying is that basically we're now going into a place where we're going to have to be lifelong learners, all of us. the skills people will need it will continue to evolve, and the pathway to there will be more pathways that people will take to grow those skills. Still, most learning, a lot of learning happens on the job, and that's why when we look at CVs and look at candidates, we look at experience. For formal learning in some kind of classroom or training type of context, there, there's still some value to maybe signaling certificates or signaling what they've been able, what they've been assessed as being able to do, the learning or the learning outcomes they've achieved, basically in a program. But I think that we should now be able to more directly assess the actual candidates, right? Their skills, their competencies, also things like their attitude, their alignment with vision, values, etc. And I think that Omalar's example about using a case study as a tool, for example, to assess in practical terms, okay, this is something that we might ask you to do on this job. Let's just give it to you, see how you do it, right? I think that sometimes those kinds of tools are both good for the employer, and they're also good for the candidate, because it gives them a very realistic taste of what it's going to be like to do that job. I think that some things that technology now enables us to do, and we are working on at 𝗪𝗂𝗿, is also assessing competencies more directly in a broader variety of ways, so that some of that, what the candidates, there's just more accurate understanding between the employer and the candidate, and really maybe self-understanding, to be honest, by the candidate of what their actual competencies are, and how that really aligns to the employer's needs.
Thanks so much, Ashley. So for ideally, this space is supposed to end by 7 o'clock, so we have 7 more minutes, ideally, but I would like to employ us that we extend it a bit to 7:15. I have a few other questions that I feel are very much timely, considering the impact of AI, right, on the global workforce currently and on workflows generally across industries. So the next few questions I'll be asking will be centered around that. But Ashley, I want you to go first. As you were speaking, you sort of like kind of answer the question I was going to ask about, because when you spoke, when you answered the first question I asked, you were speaking about passion and proactiveness. And I wanted to ask, but it escaped my mind then. How do you tell during the recruitment process that a candidate has high agency and is proactive? How can you how can you tell? And second end to that question would be, what's your take on replacing certain repetitive roles with AI? Yeah.
All right, thank you. I mean, to the first question is quite tricky. So assessing that kind of attitude proactiveness. I mean, I do think that there are some behavioral type questions, or case, either scenario question in an oral interview, or maybe even a case exercise. There are ways that you can design to sort of probe for that. So even if those questions that we use in interviews that are, tell me about a time when, right? Tell me about a time when you faced a challenge. As you're, for an interviewer who knows sort of what to listen for and how to probe and follow up, you can start to understand how that candidate thought about the challenge. How did they think about their range of options, their own role in the challenge? How proactively did they really respond vis-a-vis the options available to them? I feel like those kinds of questions I can usually quite quickly tell the degree of proactiveness, and also some of their reasoning skills and problem solving skills. So we have tools like that. We sometimes, when I design a case exercise, if it's more immersive and the candidate is actually doing something, I will also design so that I can observe how proactive they are in going through it. So for example, if they have the option to ask questions, or so, like, how do they use it, how do they use it, things like that. So I guess there are ways that we can assess it through interviews. I've not done as I'm sure that we can be clever in translating some of that into digital means of assessment as well. And I think that this, you know, as we also can kind of aggregate a view of people's experience, that can also help. And then your second question about AI. So I think you phrased it as, will we use AI to replace roles that are repetitive? I think it's a slightly different. So I think AI can automate functions that are repetitive in many people's roles. But that means that some of the roles will evolve. And then, you know, the range of roles that we hire for will also likely evolve. So when we think about the jobs that used to be considered, quote, good jobs by Nigerian parents, stereotypically, some of those, accountant, lawyer, right? The earlier career steps in those jobs, junior accountant, paralegal, etc. A lot of the work that they did day to day could really be automated. So I think those roles will change, but will you still have people who are engaging deeply in analyzing laws and policies, coming up with policies, determining how they apply to a very complex human situation, at least for the foreseeable future, probably yes, right? And in the creative, I think across the board, the more innovative, creative, and human facing components of those roles will likely continue to be more needed. I think that's where we'll need people to focus more. So I think that we will see a change in the structure of those roles. So I think that for the skills then that we are looking to build, and the skills that we look for when we're hiring, we do need to be forward looking and strategic in those. I think this was mentioned already. I think it was by you actually, Samuel, that some of the technical components of jobs, I think particularly where you're learning a body of knowledge and then applying it in a formulaic way. So as I mentioned, paralegal, accountant, right? A paralegal has learned a whole bunch of laws, and then so when you ask them, okay, what is the law on petroleum industry hiring or something like that, they can tell it back to you, and they can say, okay, and you have to, if you want to contract a company, you have to do step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? That's automatable. AI can basically do that function for you. So what we will need to focus on in the skills that we're building and when we're hiring are those soft skills, or what you can call durable skills: critical thinking, communication, leadership, teamwork, resilience, grit, all of that. And then, of course, I think people will also need to know how to manage not only themselves but their technology effectively. I saw a kind of headline from a Harvard Business Review article this morning about how coworkers have some research was done to ask people, when your coworkers deliver work that was clearly done by AI, how does this change your impression of them? And the majority said it makes them think more negatively of the coworker. This is not saying that the coworker used AI very strategically to do a better job. In this case, it's more of that AI slop. Somebody was supposed to do a report. They clearly just put some prompts into something and delivered the report without actually thinking about making sure that it actually achieves the outcomes it's trying to achieve. So I think that use of our strategic use of these tools will also be a skill. I think that's something we're all learning. And then maybe also use balancing our technology so that it's net additive, not only to our businesses and our day-to-day work, but to ourselves and our careers, not becoming addicted or over reliant on those tools as well.
Thanks a lot, Ashley. I love how you touched on the later part of um, of relying completely on AI to do your work. Um, the question I'm going to throw to DLM will be based off what you've just said. But DLM, here's the question: considering the fact that AI really, in their current state, is the worst that they would ever be, and these are models that are being developed and upgraded, improved, sometimes um, on a daily basis. In fact, on a daily basis, these things are improving. Do you genuinely think that there will come a time where AI will be able to bring in? Because I had made a post on LinkedIn a few weeks back talking about how, and this is also my point which I was making earlier about generalist and specialist. I was talking about how 10 years from now, businesses will probably be more focused on hiring skilled generalists than specialists, because the generalists will most likely be able to augment or supplement their lack of speciality in particular areas with really, really capable AI tools. Do you think that that is the future, considering how quickly these models or these tools are advancing? And yeah,
Well, so first things first, Ashley already said that AI is going to automate functions, right? And that's the simple truth. But AI cannot automate creativity, right? It cannot automate your own innovation to having to get things done. So, which means that AI will still have to depend on human intelligence to be able to get things to an optimal level, right? Now, will AI replace people? AI will replace the people that are not thinking, people that are not smart, people that are not, you know, developing themselves to even know how to create the right kind of prompt that will enable their work to be optimal on one hand, and at the same time creative on the other hand. So at the end of the day, AI in itself still depends on that human intelligence to be able to deliver the best. So you see, as of today, AI hallucinates. Yes, with AI improve. Yes, AI will improve. But will AI replace human beings or replace certain roles? Yes, it might replace certain roles. But then guess what? If you don't impute into AI, it's because I still see AI as a giggle kind of thing. You understand? At the end of the day, it is what you put in that you get out of AI, because it's kind of still rolling on data. You understand? It's rolling on data, it's rolling on training and all of that. So as a human being, you need to be able to, step up your own knowledge of what AI, the role AI plays with your own role. You understand? And see how you can step up or grow or develop yourself, arm yourself with skills, on how to use AI and how to apply AI to your own skill. Yes, will it change some skill? Yes, of course. When you think about how the computer displays the typewriter. Yes, the computer displays the typewriter, but those who are smart enough, who understand that you still have to be able to, put your hands on those keys and press those keys to be able to input data, they quickly upgraded themselves with computing skills, right? And that changed the narrative or the paradigm for them. However, those who thought that it was the end, it was really the end for them. You get. So as computer began to advance, those who advanced with it, you understand, have grown to where they are today. Same thing we apply to AI. AI will grow. AI will develop. AI will become, it's going to be a game changer. But the question is, you as an employee, you as a skilled person, how well are you developing or enhancing your skill, and how well are you applying, AI to what you know, and how creative, are you with the application of AI? And that in itself will be the real game changer, and not the fact that AI is developing or moving at a fast pace, and as such is going to displace you out of market. It's all a mindset game. and how you relate or react to this mind, to this whole notion. You get my point? That's it.
Yes, I do. Thanks a lot, DLM. I love how you piggyback on what Ashley said, talking about the quality of your prompts and the output you get from these tools. Personally, I have done so much in-depth research into these tools, and I found that really, as you said, Gigo, it's the quality of your prompts that determines the quality of the results that is produced. If you feed it with enough context, right, for whatever you need it to help you with, then it gives a much more robust answer. And very often, and I think a lot of people miss this, but when you kind of like point it to sources that are very credible, right, in your line of work, it also pulls from there and then shows that the quality of what it produces for you is excellent, or with par with what you would want it to be, or with what your clients, your supervisor would want it to be. So to kind of like summarize what you and Ashley have said, it's kind of we're not necessarily fighting against AI now. We are fighting or competing with other humans who are quickly integrating AI into their workflow to ensure maximum efficiency, productivity, and scalability. So guys, we still have a few more minutes. I'm going to throw one last question to Omolara, but after that, if you have questions, please signify and I'll bring you on stage so that you can ask or make your contributions before we bring this space to a close. So Omolara, my question for you, it's kind of like throwing you on the spot, but if you had to bet on one area in the service industry, particularly the food service industry where you operate in, that AI will completely transform in the next 5 years, what do you think that would be?
I like that question. AI is doing quite a lot currently, and I feel and I know because it's something that we're also looking into, and it's personalized nutrition. A lot of people are and opening up to the fact that their health is wealth and they want to eat right? And the way we eat before, maybe some years back, 20, 30 years ago, is different and it has changed in the way we eat now. A lot of people are more aware of fit farm, a lot of people are more aware of cholesterol, a lot of people are more aware of what they're eating, right? And I know that AI is going to come in, an AI assistant is going to come in to help the way people eat, the way people interact with food, the way people see food, right? There'll be a lot of changes in terms of nutrition and personalizing it, and I'm excited to see what AI is going to bring out in that regard.
Thanks so much, Omolara. So we're opening the floor up to questions or contributions. If you have any, kindly send a request and I will bring you on stage to ask your questions. I will give us a few seconds to do that. If there are no questions, I will proceed to bring the space to an end. Anyways, it's been amazing hearing and learning from our speakers, David, Ashley, and Omolara. I'm so happy that we got to have this space, and a big shout out to everyone. Mary, our head of comms at First Founders, made this space possible. It was all her idea, and she did all the legwork, getting the speakers on board and ensuring that we had this very insightful conversation. So shout outs to Mary. Woo! So we have one request, or a few requests. I'm going to be bringing you guys on so you can ask your questions or your contributions as the case may be. So Tunde, you can go first. Tunde, you can proceed to ask your question.
Thank you for allowing me come up. I just wanted to ask, like, for startups here, most startups when starting up, they don't have much money, and when they want to hire new devs now, they cannot really offer them monetary rewards. So how can you like convince devs or anybody, not just devs, but anybody to actually work for you or for the startup when you don't have liquidity for them right now, or you cannot afford to pay them right now? That's what I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Maybe question, DLM, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so in terms of how can you, so ideally when you're creating a startup, like for example in First Founders, the moment we create a startup, we have 10% set aside for employee stock options. We have 10% immediately set aside for the first investor. So which means that dilution even begins to happen at seed stage, because at pre-seed we already have everything structured. We structure the equity to keep the cap table clean, right? So but in terms of how do you, you don't have money to pay, how do you, sort of reward or compensate your people? You can have the conversation around employee stock option and say, hey, we have this stock option that you can take. You understand? You can prorate the salary in itself and sort of value that into, the stock option to determine the amount of equity that they can get, within that employee stock option. That's one way. Then another way is you can actually leverage on family and friends, with everybody. Everybody has one connect or the other, where you bring one or two people. Take, for example, recently we hired a senior investment manager, and the senior investment manager is bringing a strong value and is saying that, hey, DLM, can we set up a syndicate of angel investors? I have some and I know you have some. Let's bring all of them together. I can bring that. Now, see the value he's trying to bring to the table, and now we are trying to syndicate angel investor that can do a minimum of $20,000 in itself. So that effort in itself can translate into compensating, by the time we get that kind of money, compensating those who will work, in the company. At the end of the day, I always say something, maybe in the early stages, considering, I mean, the Nigerian market as it is, not everybody will want to take equity in the beginning, because come on, everybody's in survival mode. They want to survive and all of that. This is where you, as the founder of the business, have to be creative. You have to think out of the box, or even possibly destroy the box and create a new box, where we are finding new ways and saying, hey, come, how can we in itself generate revenue, for the business? How can we generate capital in such a way that, we'll be able to sort things out? And you can be creative in such a way that you can say, okay, what about if we give you, we pay you X amount, which is not up to the industry standard of pay, and then we augment it with, employee stock option. That in itself will help whoever, especially if they are highly skilled, we help them understand that, okay, there's a part payment that helps me to keep going as an employee of the company, but there is also, and the employee stock option that enable me to think long term again. But I must also state critically, and this is not just only about employee stock option. I always tell people that, I mean, I'm a Christian, so I always say, I always like to use the book of Habakkuk 2 verse 2, that says that lay the vision plain upon the table, and he that seeth it will run after it. People will want to align with you on the level of employee stock option when they know that you have a strong vision and you are truly committed to it, when they also understand that you have strong leadership skills with regards.
DLM, we can no longer hear you. I'm assuming it's network issue, but I think we get the gist of your answer to Duke's question. But I see that Omolara's hand was raised before Ashley, so Omolara can go first and Ashley can go next.
All right. In addition to what the LM has said regarding stock options, right? I also wanted to point out that as a founder, you should be able to know how to tell your story. Your first investors are your co-founders. Yes, your first investors are your first staff. You need to be able to pitch your story and sell your story to them. There are a lot of companies that are unicorns today that are doing very well today with their co-founders that didn't have any stock options. They didn't pay them salary. Right. My own co-founder, my first co-founder, I didn't pay him salary. Right. And funny enough, because I sold it so well to him, he was the one that gave me my first check. Right. So when you are looking for a co-founder, you're looking for a technical co-founder, you're looking for a developer, just even a developer, not even a co-founder, be able to sell your story, be able to sell your vision, be able to sell your dream. Because let me tell you, out there are a lot of people, sensible people, right? People that are not just there for the money. There are a lot of people that are there for the impact, people that want to be able to beat their chest and say that I was one of the people that made this business go forward. And why would they say that? Because they see the vision in you. They see your vibe. They know that this person is a visionary. This person is able to lead this thing to success. So sell your story, Sell your vision. Let them see the bigger picture. That they will be able, that they would want to even, they will not even ask you to pay them. There are people like that. It's not far-fetched. It's not like impossible. There are people out there. I'll give an example. I was speaking to a developer a few days ago. We're talking about a particular problem that we both shared, that we both felt, right? And it was like, Lara, let's start this thing together now. Let's create a solution out of this, And it just brings me to that point that you don't need too much to get a co-founder. You don't need too much to get someone that believes in your dream. You both share. You're both aligned in the problems. You both understand the problem. You both know that there needs to be a solution for this. The first thing is going to tell you is that, okay, how can we work together? How can we make this happen? The first thing is not going to ask for is, how much are you going to pay me? Because he knows that he has the problem. He knows that the next person is talking to is visionary, that we can solve this thing together. So wherever you are, whatever your product is, and whatever it is you are doing, are you able to sell your product? Can the person that you're selling it to see the vision, right? And from there, you can talk about partnership collaborations outside of having to pay salaries. So that's just my two cents. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lara. Before I pass the mic to Ashley to speak on this matter, because she had her hand raised previously. Please, can we keep the responses very brief so that we can accommodate other questions? Thank you so much. Ashley, over to you.
Yes, thank you. So in addition to those excellent points, I would quickly add, understand what is motivating those potential employees. Not everybody is a good fit for startup roles, but something that many employees will look for, especially early stage engineers, is growth and learning opportunities. So think about how they can get, and sometimes they can get a lot of learning and growth better in a very well-structured startup experience than if they were to go to a bank, for example. There are some other levers that you might have that other employers don't have. So maybe you can offer more flexibility, for example. And to start with, maybe you have an excellent candidate, but that person can only work for you part-time because they are doing some other gig work or working on some things to help pay the bills. So we'll go into it being innovative, actually, in terms of solving that problem of hiring as well.
Thanks a lot, Ashley. Jide, do you still have something to speak on this before we move on?
Well, I hope you can hear me to start with.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it would have been along the lines of what Omolara said, and I would say that as a young founder, maybe I would just suggest that you're not too invested in the idea of how you think that the problem should be solved. And I say this because it could also be the reason that is making it difficult for you to align with certain people that could typically be your co-founder. So when you're starting out like that, just like Omolara rightly mentioned, these are your primary investors, because to a very large extent, they're investing time into your business with the hope that it materializes to something great. So just join forums that you can leverage to get these people on board. Have conversation with them, be very open-minded, and see the possibilities of even closing out on certain relationship that at least would allow you get something built. Because they will typically say that when you are building out your business, you need three kinds of people: the hustlers, the hipsters, and the hackers. So hackers are like the engineering people. The hustler is you that you can find a way to get money into the company, and the other person that can potentially just make the company grant on the marketing front. So it's just very important that you're also able to sell your ideas to these kinds of people. At least the kind of challenges you are faced with, such that you can begin to pull them in, and you can have at least your co-founding team. Eventually you begin to build a team of that when money is flowing in, but at least you can leverage on platforms to get co-founders to start. I just wanted to say that.
Thanks so much, Jide. Tunde and Ben, unfortunately, if your contribution is still on this question, we are going to have to move along. I feel like Duke has gotten enough insight into that question. I'll be moving on to the next person. I think before Duke, after Duke, Abubakar, you had your. Oh, Tunde, you had your. You came on stage very early to ask questions. Please proceed.
So hi, sorry to cut you short. This is Tunde. Can you hear me?
Tunde, can you hear me? Tunde, I cannot hear you. For lack of time, I'm going to move on. Ben, please proceed with your question.
Okay, good evening, everyone. It's such an insightful topic so far, and I'm really excited to be here. And to be honest, I've learned a lot. But my question is in regards to the next step after getting an MVP. Do you focus on scaling or refining or on funding? What do you think? Where do you think founders get it wrong after getting an MVP? Because sometimes it's not just about having the product, but what to do when you have the product. That's my question. Thank you.
Fantastic question, Ben. DLM, as the serial entrepreneur and venture builder here, please take the questions, but keep the response very brief. Thank you. I can see that your mic is unmuted, but I cannot hear you, DLM.
I think he's been having troubles with his network for a while.
All right. Ashley, do you want to take that?
Yes, sure. So quickly, I think really the first step is product market fit. When you have your MVP out, you might be fortunate to land on that right away, usually not. So, product market fit means that people are using your product and they are paying for it and they're willing to pay more than what it costs to deliver it, more or less. You've got a functioning business model. So typically after MVP you have to do some additional iterating, that build, measure, learn, until you get to that stage. Then at that stage, really, I suppose next steps might depend partly on the business. Not every startup needs to raise any kind of funding. Some startups may need an injection of capital in order to be able to scale up and or deliver some more of really what they think needs to be created. Some might need debt funding because they need I won't get into the distinctions, but you might need equity funding, you might need debt funding, you might just live off of revenue. It depends on the nature of the business model.
Thank you, Ashley. DLM, do you want to add to that, or do we move forward? I still cannot hear you, DLM. Ben, I hope that answers your question. Does it?
Yes. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you. Ben, Yusuf, you had your hands raised. If you have a question, please proceed. Yusuf, can you hear me? You can proceed to ask your question. I'm going to take two more questions and then we bring the space to a close.
Actually, I don't have a question. I was just hoping, like, I want to make some additional points based on what the speakers have talked about.
Well, unfortunately, we will not be able to take that. Sorry.
All right,
Abubakar,
no
please,
problem.
if you have a question.
Yeah, okay. Mine too is actually not a question. It's a point I wanted to bring out. Can I go?
Sadly, we can't. Sadly, we can't for want of time. Isaiah, do you have a question?
Yes, I do have a question.
Please
Good
proceed.
evening, everyone. And I must commend the session. This is very helpful and thoughtful as well. Thanks to everyone that has spoken. I think my question, I think I kind of thought about it after hearing some of the few things that the speaker have mentioned. DLM, Ashley, and Homalara. Thanks so much for your powerful contribution. I think I would start my question around technology management. I think Ashley mentioned that, right? And for a startup that, also gives room for growing talent, right? Are there some practical ways to, help these perhaps newbies? Obviously, I mean, a lot of things have been mentioned around having people that are not specialists, and you want to still grow your business in that regards and all of that. So, and the key thing around this is technology management, and with the advent of AI and all of that, I know some examples has been mentioned. I don't want to reiterate on that, but how can you, with practical steps, speed up how this your growing talents within